Get started. Let's get started. First of all, I'd like to invite the deputations to join us, and the administration team can also join us. Hi. We have a total of 36 deputations who have indicated that they'd like to speak, but then as you can see here, for whatever reason, some deputations have not yet arrived. So whatever may be the cause, we'll just invite them to speak one by one, and if they have not turned up when it's their turn, then they may have to wait for the next session, and we would not be able to allow them to speak again in another session, because if those who have been scheduled to speak in the first session do not turn up, and if all of them turn up in the second session, then we simply will not be able to cope. Alright, first of all, let's say a few words on the housekeeping matters and the rule for speaking. Alright, you have the earpiece. 0 is the floor. 0 is floor. Channel 1 is Cantonese and 2 is the English channel, and then Putonghua. We now have Putonghua interpretation service. Sorry, this meeting is not provided with Putonghua interpretation service. And just a reminder, your remarks and submissions will not be covered by the Electrical Powers and Privileges Ordinance. Each deputation will have 3 minutes to speak, and as soon as you start, as you can see, the timer will start to count, and then by the time when 3 minutes up, there'll be a beep sound reminding you that your time is up. If you overrun, then there may not be enough time for the other deputations to speak. As we have 36 deputations today, we will be dividing the meeting into 2 parts, and the first part will end by around 3:45, and then for deputations who are scheduled to speak in the first part, we will set aside some time for members to put questions to them. Well, let's get started right away. We have Ms. Kwong Sam Yin, Chief Executive from the Clean Air Network. Over to you. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Last month, the WHO announced that air pollution indoor is a carcinogen, and it can cause lung cancer, stroke, and many diseases. And today we are speaking on behalf of the public, and we'd like members to take their health as your priority in scrutinizing the bill. And roadside air pollution is one of the biggest dangers or health hazards, and the WHO would like to phase out Euro 1 and Euro 2, and by 2017 Euro 3, 4 will be phased out, and then there will be another stage of phasing out the other polluting vehicles. We believe that we should advance it by 1 year, but then in the September amendment moved by the administration, we can see that the incentive will be increased from $800 million to $11.7 billion, but then for the extension of the license, it will be extended by another year. You'll be paying more, and yet the public will have to put up with that for another year. That is, there'll be more emissions. So the administration has ignored the bottom line, and it has also ignored the demands from the medical sector and also the green groups. And there are about 3,000 premature deaths every year, and also cancer cases. We believe that the health hazard is very serious, and Clean Air Network is very disappointed. That's why we don't want to wait any further. That's why we'd like to come up with this joint signature campaign together with medicals and also the education and also the green groups. We'd like to urge you to scrutinize the bill from the perspective of protecting public health, and we should legislate as soon as possible to phase out the older models which are polluting vehicles. And before the meeting started, we submitted a joint signature document to Ms. Sito, the chairperson of the meeting. We hope that you can act on behalf of public health in scrutinizing the bill with regard to roadside air pollution in Hong Kong, because all along we have not come up with any legislation to phase out the older models vehicles which are polluting. That's why we have already got Euro 6 models available, and yet we are still allowing pre-Euro vehicles that have been on the roads for more than 20 years, and they are emitting very polluting exhaust gas. That's why we believe that for the newly registered diesel vehicles, the 15-year limit should not be extended any further. The administration should not accept any further amendment. And then on the 2nd of October at the EA panel meeting, the Bureau Director promised that once every 6 months he'll be submitting a progress report on the effectiveness of the phase-out program. We hope that with the enactment of the legislation, then in the FC paper, the administration can put that down in writing so that we'll be able to make sure that public money will be used in the right place. All right, as chairperson of the subcommittee, I've been asked to accept this petition because we have the green leaf, we have a green leaf and also a black lung, but then it's not supposed to be put on the table of the chair. So I'll be showing you this, and then I'll be putting that behind me. All right, next. Mr. Kok-fan from the North District Council. Madam Chair, this is not one of my main areas of research, but then when I scrutinized this bill, I received a lot of concerns expressed by the public, in particular the grassroots. They are concerned that the program might affect their livelihood. In fact, just when you announced the introduction of this legislation and also the details, many from the trade, in particular the individual vendors in the market and also those in the transportation sector, have told us that they had difficulty procuring new vehicles, and for them to buy a new vehicle, well, in the past usually they would be able to get hold of it in a month's time, and now it will take them about 6 months. And also for second-hand vehicles, well, before you can see the benefit, you're actually adversely affected because the prices have gone up by more than 20%, and they are concerned that once this bill is enacted, then vehicle prices will soar further. That's why I have a few questions for the Environment Bureau today. All right, within the specified period, you said that you'd like to phase out pre-Euro, Euro 1 and Euro 2 and Euro 3 vehicles. There are about 80,000 such vehicles on the roads right now. So are you aware whether or not there are sufficient number of Euro 5 vehicles, some 80,000 in the market for them to replace them? This is a very important issue, because if there aren't enough such vehicles available, then what do you expect them to do? So are you asking them to buy new vehicles all over? Not all of them can afford it. Yes, you have increased the amount of the subsidy, but then everything will come from them as well, because they'll have to pay higher duty. And in fact, you're actually robbing Peter to pay Paul. So on the one hand, they'll be paying more taxes, and on the other, they'll be getting the subsidy. What we can see is they are most concerned about the 15-year serviceable life, and then for Euro newer models, there will be this serviceable life limit, and they are very worried about this, because for an individual operator, after they have bought a new vehicle, it will take them 7 or 8 years before they can break even or get a return from the vehicle that they bought. And then by the time it reaches 15 years, they'll have to replace it again. So for these individual operators, they would be just working for the dealers or the vehicle agents. So can we further amend the legislation so that we can extend that by 1 further year? For example, for pre-Euro it's 2017, and then Euro 1 it's 2018, and then for 2 is 2019, and then for Euro 3 is 2020. So can you move such amendments? All right, next, Mr. John Ma from the Bus Suppliers Federation. Yes, I'm representing the bus industry, and we supply non-franchise buses to the market. Mr. C.Y. Leung in January 2013 announced his first budget, and he talked about this $10 billion to be spent on the replacement of diesel vehicles. All along, we have been very supportive of that. And during the past few years, non-franchise buses, in the face of the administration's incentive scheme to replace diesel vehicles, we have been very supportive. In fact, we have one of the highest rates of replacement. And with the subsidy scheme in place, that would be very helpful to us. In particular, if there is a seamless transition, they don't have to wait till it's their turn to replace their vehicles, and still they will be able to replace them. And now it's the turn to replace Euro 2 vehicles, but then by June this year, Euro 2 vehicles will no longer be eligible to get the subsidy. So there is a very long vacuum period. So for the suppliers and agents of such buses, we have to consider the whole cycle. We are actually in an ice age, and we hope that the administration can give us a reply as to when this replacement scheme can be launched. Well, in the past, we didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and now we can finally see a ray of hope. We are not here to just make money. We are actually helping many working in a factory. We do carry out repairs and maintenance works. We do have a lot of members who serve in those sectors, and we hope that we can all work together with the chief executive so that we can strive for change while maintaining stability. We hope that that could be a shared vision. And then as far as our trade is concerned, to be honest with you, because of the supply of Euro 5, we're not going to increase our prices because competition is really very fierce. It's not just we don't just have Euro 5 vehicles, we also have Japanese models and also mainland models. In fact, the competition in the market is very robust, and we hope that the public will understand that in this regard we are also contributing to our society. Thank you. Next, Lord Ma Chau, China Hong Kong Freight Association, Mr. Stanley Chiang. Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the incentive scheme to replace Euro 4 vehicles and also the 15-year serviceable life, after repeated discussions amongst ourselves, our association has also issued 2 questionnaires to seek the views of our trade members, and the response is that they are all in favor of this incentive scheme. And for the 15-year serviceable life limit, this is also a new rule to our trade. We have taken reference from other places, including Shenzhen. They all have this serviceable life limit. And therefore, for the long-term improvement of air quality in Hong Kong, we are prepared to accept the 2 arrangements. Yet at the same time, we hope that members will review this, because the reason why there is this low incentive in replacing our trucks, that's because the first registration tax is about 4 times that of private cars, and therefore we think that trucks are being discriminated. Well, we have this 15% first registration tax, and then for passenger vehicles is about 4%. We don't understand why, when it comes to heavy vehicles, there is such a discrepancy. Why is it that for passenger vehicles and trucks, we are all serving the community? Why is it that we have to pay a higher tax? We hope that the administration will review the FRT for lorries, and that would also affect the incentive or otherwise of owners in replacing their vehicles in the long term. We should be treated fairly.
Next, we have the Hong Kong Container Drayage Services Association Limited, Mr. Wong. Thank you. I, myself, the Hong Kong Container Drayage Services Association Limited. Our association conducted a questionnaire survey among the members, and almost 99% of our members are in support of the Environmental Bureau's proposal. All of our members are very supportive of the efforts to reduce air pollution. We are in full support of the proposal by the Environmental Bureau, and we hope that the proposals will be implemented as soon as possible.
The Chinese International School student.
Thank you, Chairman. Other than representing my school, I also like to represent the young generation and the next generation of Hong Kong. I am about to graduate and I'm applying for admission to the university. Very often when I ask my peers whether or not they will come back to Hong Kong, and very often they say they won't because the air pollution is so bad in Hong Kong. I can't say the air quality is very bad, but I certainly wouldn't say that it's good. So the government indeed has considered ways to improve on our air quality, but the government cannot, delay the legislation to regulate diesel vehicles. Other than being accountable for our health, you have to provide the safeguard for our next generation. I understand many green groups are present today, and they will be supplying you with various data, and I shan't repeat them here. Just remind members of the committee that 7% of all the vehicles in Hong Kong are commercial diesel vehicles, and they emit about 70% of all the diesel particulates. I understand the trade's concern, and in response to those concerns, the government has offered an ex gratia payment and has adjusted the amount of payment. I hope the government will not delay the scheme. The more the delay, we will have to put up with the pollution for longer. The bus companies want the taxable value for the single and double-decker buses should be separate, and the Environmental Bill has already promised to do that. And there's no. And it's also, and the district councillor from North District also talk about the single, lorry operator. We cannot overlook their needs. If we could eliminate 80,000 diesel vehicles, we can reduce the pollution emission by 80%. So I hope the government can arrive at a consensus with the trade so that they can honor the undertaking they have given in the policy address, so that we can achieve the emission standards for 2015 and 2020, so that we can really, work for the benefit of next generation, and that we'll be able to see blue skies again. Next, Mr. Chen from the Chamber of Hong Kong Logistics Industry. Thank you. Having heard the other deputations and the young lady, I must say that they may understand one point. I also have children and grandchildren. We care about the next generation. However, our trade is also affected by this proposal. Myself and my peers are very much in support of the proposal now put forward by the government. More money will be spent, more of the taxpayers' money will need to be spent, but then in return we'll have better air quality. I hope the Bureau will implement these measures as soon as possible. But regarding the 15 years service life limit, and that is after 15 years the vehicles will need to be scrapped, I find this debatable because technology is changing all the time. Perhaps 3 years from now, Euro 4, Euro 5 will no longer comply with international standards. What are we going to do then? So I don't think we should follow other jurisdictions. We should have our own independent thinking. We should follow the international standard and carry out an assessment every year instead of setting a 15-year limit. Maybe 5 years from now, we may see Euro 8 and Euro 10 models which still fail to comply with world standards. So, Mr. Mac, I hope you will really review the 15-year service life limit. After the regulation becomes law, I hope you will conduct a further review and see whether we need to make annual reviews in order that we can improve on our air quality. Next, we have Mr. Law from the Hong Kong Truckers Association. Well, most of our members would say that if there's a choice, they would rather not have this scheme. Many of the people in our trade are self-employed, especially many of them are rather old in age, and to them, buying a car and selling a car is just a business for them. Now, if the car is being taken away, they would lose their job, and they're too old to get another job, and the only choice for them is to rely on Social Security. We always say that whether or not we have clean air or not, people will not die immediately, but if you don't have enough to eat, you will die. The government is now taking up the issue which concerns the health of all 7 million people of Hong Kong, and I'm more in favor of that. Another deputation said that we are also one of the victims of poor air quality. Since we can improve upon the air quality, and we agree, therefore, to the proposal, and therefore we let the public know that we are not asking the government to pay us out of the public funds. That's not our intention, except that we want to tell the public that what the government will need to be fair, including the need to look after our ability to make a living. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chau. Next, we have the Civic Exchange, represented by Mr. Sin Pak Hung. Have I mispronounced your name? No. Thank you. The government proposal to phase out the pre-Euro diesel vehicles in phases and setting up the 15-year service life limit. I think we support the proposal in principle based on the need to protect public health. But I think this is too late in coming. The WHO and many studies have shown that pollution emission from diesel vehicles will cause many health hazards, including lung cancer. And we also understand that there will be other public health experts who will also further elaborate on this. So I'll leave it to them to further explain to members. Emission from old diesel vehicles are much higher, several times or even a lot more than the new diesel vehicles. The roadside pollution caused by diesel vehicles is the greatest risk to human health. And replacing the old, the highly polluting diesel vehicles by new models of diesel vehicles is the the most crucial way to protect public health. The Civic Exchange would like to reiterate that as far as the ex-gratia payment is concerned and the timetable for phasing out the pre-Euro and the Euro models, the government has already made concessions, including the extending the period for the scrapping of the pre-Euro models, the proposal which we do not support, because public will have to put up such emission which are carcinogenic, and therefore we've also bear in mind that the emission will have adverse impact on our health. There's no need, we believe, to further, extend the service life limit of the diesel vehicles. While the new diesel vehicles perform better in terms of emission, after they've been used for a long time, the parts will become old and the diesel particulates emitted will go up. Unless the government implement more stringent and reasonable emission standards for diesel vehicles. The 15-year service life limit is already very reasonable. It can ensure that the old diesel vehicles can be gradually phased out by the other diesel vehicles with low emission standards. I'm sure members understand the urgency of the problem regarding air pollution because the impact on human health is very serious. Many of you would also be affected. I think the meeting today is a good opportunity for members and our peers from the trade to hear the view, the support for early amendment of the law. We cannot delay any further, and I hope members will help get this regulation enacted as soon as possible so that the health of the public and our next generation will be protected. Next, we have Mr. Yuen Cheng Fong from the concern group for the elimination of diesel vehicles. Where air quality is very important, as a member of the transportation industry, we are also concerned about air quality, but we are more concerned about our own families. Of the 100,000 vehicles, two-thirds of them will need to be phased out. We're talking about 80,000 practitioners in the trade, and they have to support several 100,000 people. And these people will depend on such vehicles to make a living. If you think that they don't deserve your sympathy, you think that the vehicle should be immediately, scrapped, what's going to happen to these 100,000 of people? The green groups must remember that you're not a member of the trade. You don't know how difficult it is for us to operate. If you try to buy a new vehicle and operate a business, you will know how painful it is. Every day, they are struggling to survive. They are holding on to the old vehicle, not because they want to, pollute the air. They just want to make a living and survive. Our alliance have had more than 10 meetings with the government, including the meeting with the Bureau and the departments and electrical members, to reflect to them our concern and our hardship. We've explained to them the hardship we're suffering. We don't really want to accept this proposal. But then we also agree that we should make a contribution to the community. And that's why we've reached an agreement with the government. Our alliance have no choice but to accept this proposal. Don't think that we accept the proposal gladly. The 15-year service life limit is not something that we would like. You say that in 2015, 2016, 2017, you will phase out the pre-Euro and pre-Euro 3 and 4 models. We don't want to accept that. The government, I think you should allow these people to continue to operate so that they can continue support for their family for a year or two. They really work hard every day. Do you want them to abandon their vehicles and then the whole families will then have to depend on social security? All of us would like to make a contribution to our community. Don't just be bogged down by a timetable. Since we've already made a compromise and accept the reform proposal by the government, why are there still so many comments objecting to our proposal? Originally we should have the Mr. Chen from the from China, Hong Kong and Macau Boundary Crossing Bus Association. Since you've just arrived, I'll give you a few minutes to settle down, and I'll invite Friends of the Earth to speak first. Miss Melanie Chau. Friends of the Earth believe that the present measure proposed by the government will help, reduce roadside pollution. In order to protect public health, we will support the proposed legislation. At the same time, we propose the government should set up a monitoring mechanism to ensure that the measure will be effective before you can convince the public. The WHO already published a report saying that outdoor air quality pollution is a carcinogen, especially the small particulates will cause cancer. So air pollution could really be fatal. It's not. It's certainly a serious problem. In 2010. More than 20,000 people died of lung cancer because of air pollution. Whether it's the passengers or the drivers, it's a risk to them. So tackling air pollution is an urgent task that has to be done throughout the world, especially in Hong Kong, which is a small place with a large number of vehicles. And vehicle emissions is the major source of air pollution and health hazards. So we also know that the measures may affect the livelihood of many professional drivers. Therefore, the Friends of Earth, during the consultation period, also wanted to do something to help the trade fight for a better compensation package. And I will regard this as a consensus. The government has come up with a extra payment scheme to the tune of 11.7 billion. So if we could strike a balance between incentive and punishment, that we should enact the legislation as soon as possible so that both the public and the drivers will be able to breathe cleaner air. We also like to emphasize that the government should stand by the original proposal without any delay. Since the scheme involves a huge amount of public funds, the government therefore has a duty to set an effective monitoring mechanism so that electrical members, the public, the professional drivers will know about the progress of the implementation and ensure that our emission targets could be achieved. Once every 6 months, the government should report to electrical and submit a report on the progress so to ensure the public funds are used properly. And the information provided would include the effectiveness of emission control, financial position, the people in the trade who are affected, and also the prices of new vehicles and the supply and demand situation of such vehicles.
Thank you, Ms. Chau. Next, we have Mr. Lai Hek Ken, Research Assistant Professor from the Hong Kong U School of Public Health. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the traffic flow is increasing, and air pollution has already exceeded the WHO's guideline. And we have already reached a stage whereby we are all susceptible to cancer, and we are already about 12 times higher than those which are not susceptible to this. For example, when compared to Paris, in terms of traffic or air pollution by traffic, they've been reducing that since 12 years ago, and they've been able to reach the WHO standard. And Hong Kong, vis-a-vis Paris, one is ever rising, and the other is ever coming down with air pollution. What's lacking in Hong Kong is precisely a selfless love and care. How come worldwide and elsewhere, with scientific evidence and medical evidence available, why is it that we are not willing to believe in them? So do we have to wait till such critical illness affects you before you be aware of that? So we have chronically ill, pregnant women, children, and the elders, and also those who are the grassroots, and they are living in the front line. They would bear the brunt of air pollution, and their health is being eroded by air pollution and poor air quality. It's not just about feeding them. It's about whether or not they can have clean air to breathe. Do you understand their plight and suffering? Well, in Hong Kong, we have 3,200 people who have been killed by air pollution. So where has our love gone? Do we care for these people? Why do we have to worry about how much money we're going to make tomorrow, or how much less we'll be making tomorrow? Why are we allowing Hong Kong to go down the drain? Why are we not concerned about the victims who are suffering because of this? Why are we not comparing ourselves with other world-class cities? Is it because we are too selfish, because we love ourselves more than other people? That's why we are doing this. Well, with this proposed legislation is already what the administration has been able to agree with other sectors, including the business sector and green groups and so on. And I understand that the administration has already made some concessions in order to make sure that the legislation can be enacted as scheduled in order to protect public health. It's not just for the sake of the interests of some groups. That's why the Hong Kong U is in support of enacting this piece of legislation as soon as possible. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Wong Chit Ming, Associate Professor from the Public Health Research Center of the Hong Kong U. Well, air pollution affects health has already got a lot of scientific evidence. In year 2000, the University of Hong Kong has managed to get the sponsorship from a US institute, and we have led a study in Asian cities, and also we looked into the relationship between air pollution and public health, and in 2001 we published this report, and it's already proven that for people who are exposed to polluted air, they would gradually develop symptoms, and the risk of them dying prematurely would grow exponentially. And according to our studies, RSP, nitrogen, sulfur dioxide, would cause health hazards, and they would cause cardiovascular diseases, for example, anemic, ischemic heart disease, and also respiratory diseases, for example, chronic air blockage, and also asthma, and even respiratory infections or bronchitis. And for the high-risk groups, we have the infants and also elders. In particular, those who are the disadvantaged groups, they lack resources, and that might result in social injustice. And what are the causes of air pollution? Vehicles running on the roads, hence the introduction of high efficiency and low emission vehicles is something very urgent, and that can also be implemented within the short term that could help reduce air pollution substantially. In Hong Kong, air pollution, according to our calculation, has resulted in health hazards, and if you try to quantify that, we are actually talking about a social cost of some $40 billion rather. And if the administration is able to reduce RSP by say 80% and sulfur dioxide by 30%, then within a year we'll be able to avoid some $8 billion of financial loss. And if the timetable is further extended, we will have to consider public health and also the economic price that we have to pay. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Next, we have Mr. Wong Chung Hon from the North District Vegetable Association. Yes, we should support the legislation. Well, when it comes to air pollution, it depends on the situations. Well, for those of us working in the vegetable sector, we transport vegetables from the wholesale market to our market, and therefore the trips that we take will be very few. And then for others, they might have to replace their vehicles in less than 10 years. But then it's very different for us. You do have examination standards as far as RSP is concerned. Well, when you examine your vehicle, you'll be able to tell for how much longer you can use your vehicle. We hope that we can extend the replacement period for Euro 2 and 3 if we can extend that the deadline by 1 more year. And then for some of the more heavy vehicles, actually we only have a few suppliers available in Hong Kong, and when new models are available, they will have to queue up for a long time before they can get a new vehicle transported to Hong Kong. That's why I hope that you can consider our suggestion. Thank you. Well, 2 deputations have just arrived, so I'll try to call upon them to speak first. First, we have Mr. Chau from the Fresh Fruits and Vegetable Logistics or Hong Kong Fresh Produce Logistics Association. Mr. Chau. Thank you. With regard to air pollution, it is a health hazard. Well, all right, that's right. We also support the Blue Sky action, and for many years, both the Environment Bureau and the administration, Mr. Wong, the Bureau Director, and Ms. Christine Low, have met us on many occasions, and now we have got this scheme, and there are more than 40 groups in the trade. We have no alternative but to accept this because our operating environment is very bad. If we can be given this ex gratia payment, then we will be able to continue with our living. For those in the trade, it's not just for members of the Fresh Produce Logistics Association. We're talking about the entire sector. The burden on us will be a lot lighter. And as we have done in the past, we have been serving the community. We all agree with that. And if we, despite the hard work that we have made within the recent months and weeks, what we are all prepared to do that. As to whether this legislation can be enacted, it's up to members to decide. Whatever can be done, if we can advance it so that we can implement it earlier, I think to the trade and to the community, we have to be prepared for that so that we can replace our vehicles in a timely manner. Because for our lorries and also the facilities and also the replacement program, it would take a very long lead time for us to procure a new vehicle. But then we also understand that we have to improve our air quality. We hope that lawmakers will understand this. It's not that we are greedy. It's not that we are raw for the subsidy. We are also very concerned about public health. But then as far as possible, we hope that we can all make a living and be able to live happily here. We hope that all of us can work together so that we can achieve a win-win situation. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Alan Chan, Secretary General from the China, Hong Kong and Macau Boundary Crossing Bus Association. Madam Chair, first of all, we support this scheme. We also hope that the scheme can be implemented as soon as possible, because a few months earlier, there were different views from the sector, and as a result, the plan has been delayed, and many who would like to buy a new vehicle have waited for several months now, and we hope that the licenses can be issued as soon as possible, or else within the next 18 months or so, we won't be able to have the licenses issued because there is a bottleneck here. And everybody would like to get that within the first quarter of next year, and if the workload is so heavy, then there is simply no chance that we'll be able to supply all the buses within such a short space of time. With regard to the proposed scheme, I'd like to make 2 points. First, under the current proposal before this Council, it's already an improvement when compared to the earlier one, because whether or not the owners are going to replace their vehicles, they'll be eligible for this subsidy. So for the vehicle agents, there is this mechanism for them to scrap their vehicles, because for new vehicles you have to invest in procuring a new car, but then there is an opt-out mechanism, so they can all leave the market if they want. So it's not like the earlier subsidy. You will have to buy a new vehicle before you'll be able to get the subsidy or extra payment. For the SMEs, that would also help them with regard to their cash flow. And some in the trade, they might be small enterprises, or they might already be rather old, and so that would allow them to just surrender their vehicles and leave the market. So there is no requirement that they will have to buy a new one before they will be eligible. So long as they are prepared to scrap their vehicles, they are already contributing to cleaning our air. So that's point number one. Second, with regard to the 15-year service life limit, initially we thought that 15 years might be a bit too short, but then given the fact that all in the sector are prepared to accept this, because initially we used the buses, most of them would be Euro models, and even for the youngest fleet, the average age would be some 20-30 years. But then if we want to have a level playing field so that everybody will be replacing their vehicles after a certain period of time, and if that has to be applied across the board, then the cost for everyone will be the same, and there will be a level playing field, and therefore we are prepared to accept this 15 years limit. So we have already been prepared to make that concession, given the fact that it's going to apply across the board. Sorry, I have a few more points to make. Sorry, you only have 3 minutes. Next, Green Sense, Ms. Ho Ka Po. Am I coming through? Am I coming through? Madam Chair and friends, my name is Tam Wai Pong from Green Sense, and the overriding direction is to support the administration in introducing this scheme to improve roadside air quality. This is a funding application, and this is an incentive scheme. I hope that the administration will work out with the trade which is satisfactory to both sides, because roadside air pollution is the major source of air pollution, and therefore for the older diesel vehicles, they should be replaced first. But then I also hope that the administration will also encourage good maintenance, because for the older vehicles, it doesn't mean that their maintenance is improper and therefore they are worse off. So in terms of annual checkup, can we do it more stringently? I'm not an expert, but then I have been told that if you look at the Kowloon Bay vehicle examination, they only have a very rude machine to check the RSP, but then how about other, for example, sulfur dioxide and other pollutants? You should have been able to check that too. And if you're able to do that, then I would have the impression that the policy is more comprehensive, or else I would just have this impression that you're targeting the sector. We hope that we can discuss with the administration and reach a consensus. And the second point that I'd like to make is, well, the administration would very much like to reduce air pollution, but then some of your policies might run counter to this. You are building more roads. Latest example is the central Kowloon route. Apparently, you have actually connected east-west Kowloon, but then with this thoroughfare, then there'll be more vehicles running on this route, and that might more than offset what we have spent today, the $11.7 billion to replace these polluting vehicles. That's why, if the administration really wants to control air pollution, then you will have to reduce the number of vehicles in the first place. That's reducing pollution at source, and you will also have to reduce emission instead of building more roads.
Finally, I'd like to also talk about private vehicles. Private vehicles running on gasoline should have less emission, but then we have too many private vehicles. If you just, stand on the footbridge on top of the Hong Nam Cross Harbour Tunnel, you find that there are more private vehicles than heavy vehicles. I hope there will be measures to which would also focus on the private vehicles, and only that would be fair. So all the deputations have finished for the first session. I'd like to ask the Secretariat to check, to tell others who are on for the schedule for the first session, not that they won't have a chance to speak in the second session. If they're late, they shouldn't be late for an hour, and if they are sincere, they should come on time. So I'd like to know how many members of this council would like to speak. Okay, we have 5 members. So I'll read out your names. Mr. Gary Chan, Mr. Tenkar Pio, Mr. Pun Siu Ping, Mr. Chen Kalok, and Mr. Yip Chi Ping. I think we're scheduled to finish at 3:45, so shall we have 4 minutes for each member? Thank you, Mr. Garrison. I'd like to thank all the deputations. Having heard them, their comments, I think the trade and the green groups are inclined to support the government's proposal, although you may have different views regarding the details. I have noted in particular that some of our friends from the trade have touched on the question of the replacement of old vehicles. I'm also very concerned. The government has now come up with a new proposal so that the single vehicle operators will not lose their jobs because of this new initiative. Many of the deputations pointed out that when the government requires certain vehicles to be replaced, then we need about 80,000 new second-hand vehicles to replace them. So I'd like to ask the government what it can do, or what will it do? Because we're talking about a free market here. There may not be 80,000 such cars available to help our friends from in the industry to replace the old ones. So as the promoter of the policy, so what role can you play to ensure that there will be sufficient number of second-hand vehicles that meet the environmental standards to supply to the trade so that they can replace the outdated vehicles? They would like to replace the vehicles as well, but with a shortage of supply, some of them may be forced to leave the industry, and this is a very important question. Secretary or Mr. Lai? Thank you for the question. As far as the administration is concerned, we will do 2 things. First of all, we will work with the vehicle supply industry. Hopefully they will bring in more models of commercial diesel vehicles into Hong Kong so that there will be more choices. And hopefully with competition, the prices will be lower. Chairman, I was asking about the supply of second-hand vehicles. Many of the deputations may not be able to afford to buy new vehicles. I want to ask whether you can ensure there will be sufficient supply of second-hand vehicles. We will work on the supply of new vehicles. As for second-hand vehicles, we have 120,000 commercial vehicles. For Euro 3 and pre-Euro, we're talking about 80,000 such vehicles. If the owners do not want to replace the vehicle twice, and they want to buy a second-hand diesel vehicle that will satisfy our standard and run it for a few more years, their choice at the moment is to buy a Euro 4 or Euro 5 model which is already registered, and we have about 40 to 50,000 in the market. And I said that when I talk about the supply of new vehicles, after we've given the ex gratia payment, then the owners can, in the light of his own need, decide whether not to buy another car and whether to buy a new one or a second-hand car. I hope members and our friends of trade will understand that while the scheme focuses on the 80,000 Euro 3 and older diesel vehicles, we're not forcing the vehicles to replace the vehicles in 1 year. We will adopt a progressive approach with a deadline of 2020, January 2020. So we will work on the supply of new vehicles, and also with the supply of second-hand vehicles. I'm sure we can provide a viable, option for the trade to replace the vehicles. Well, what happens if there is indeed a shortage of second-hand vehicles and the operators cannot buy a replacement vehicle? What are they going to do? Would they be forced to retire? Talking about the supply of second-hand vehicles, if we take a snapshot survey, we are talking about 40 to 50,000 in the market. We will not allow Euro 3, 4, and 5 diesel vehicles to second-hand Euro 3, 4, 5 vehicles from other countries to be imported in Hong Kong unless they satisfy a standard. So basically, we're talking about new vehicles. I understand that someone in the trade, people in the trade, would like to buy a second-hand vehicle for replacement. So, Mr. Tangkapil, different deputations have expressed different views depending on their respective interests. I've also helped the trade to come to this consensus. It's not an easy achievement, but for some models of the diesel vehicles, like the school buses, for example, and also the vehicles which only transport vegetables and fruits, and they're only running on the road for a couple of hours, and they're not like taxis which run for longer periods on the road. And also, if these vehicles are properly maintained and serviced, perhaps they shouldn't be phased out. But then we need consistency for specified industries or trades. For example, for school buses, that would be under the purview of the Education Bureau, and for the AFCD, they would be responsible for the vehicles carrying fruits and vegetables. I hope those departments will come up with measures to help them go through, tie them through this transitional period. And secondly, under this policy, I understand that regulations will come into effect from February 1st, 2014. So with the commencement of the new regulations, all new vehicles will only have a service life limit of 15 minutes. What about the Euro 4, Euro 5 vehicles registered between February 1st next year? They will not be subject to the 15-year limit. So for these vehicles which are not bound by the 15-year service limit, they can run for 25 years. So how many such vehicles are there? And secondly, I've learned that many dealers are telling the truckers that they should now buy the vehicles. If they buy a Euro 5 model now, they can use it for more than 15 years or even up to 25. If you buy a Euro 5 model now, is it the case that they can bypass the 15-year restriction? Mr. Lai. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tang, for your question. Regarding the registration of vehicles, Mr. Tang is correct. With the enactment of this regulation, starting from February 1st next year, all newly registered vehicles will be bound by the 15-year service life limit, unless after 15 years they can prove that the maintenance and the emission of such vehicles satisfy the prevailing standard at the time, at which time they can apply for an exemption. Otherwise, those vehicles only run for 15 years. As for vehicles registered before February 1st, 2014, you're right. Those vehicles will not be restricted by the 15-year service life limit. As at the end of March this year, we have 46,000 such Euro 4 and Euro 5 vehicles which already been registered in Hong Kong. I said many car dealers are now urging the drivers to buy vehicles now, because if they buy now, then they can use such vehicles for 25 years. Is that right? If such new vehicles were registered before the regulation comes into force, in principle they will not be bound by this regulation. But it's whether or not in future, or many years from now, whether the government will come up with new regulations or schemes to look at these Euro 4 and 5 vehicles, we can't say at this moment. So if you ask whether or not it could be used forever, I wouldn't say that. Could you, undertake to conduct a study, that is, how many new Euro 5 models have been registered during this period of time, so that we know, how strong the market forces are. So since members have raised this question, Mr. Lau, the government should really, come up with an amendment so that for vehicles registered before February 1st next year, the owners will not have the misunderstanding that they can use those vehicles forever. Since those registered after that day will have a limit of 15 years, why are you being inconsistent here? So when we go to the clause-by-clause scrutiny, perhaps we could discuss this further. Mr. Pun Siu Ping, thank you. I've heard the deputations just now, and my impression is that all of us are in support of the consensus which has been arrived at. The trade has certain concerns, which I'd like to ask the government as to how they would deal with them. Some deputations told us that if indeed you were to implement the scheme from February 1st next year, that they are concerned about whether or not there will be sufficient supply of new vehicles. Some deputations are worried that they may have difficulties in getting licensed. And regarding the vehicle body building companies, there are only a few in the market. So has the administration come up with arrangements to these companies? Regarding the 15-year limit, some deputations say that the vehicle inspection is very important. That is, you should base your decision on the emission performance. Some deputations pointed out that some vehicles are only run only for a very short period on the road every day. So would the inspection criteria be also considered? So you'll monitor the emission standards. So for vehicles which have been used for more than 15 years, so long as they, satisfy the emission standards, they should be allowed to continue to be used. Thank you. Regarding the issuance of license, basically we work together with the Transport Department when we implement the scheme. So regarding the progress of this scheme, and the number of vehicles affected, they have very good graphs of the situation. The TD has not told us that this replacement scheme will cost them any insurmountable problems. Obviously, there will be an increase in the workload. Secondly, regarding the bodies of the vehicles, we've actually talked to some of the vendors in the market and discussed with them this scheme for the replacement of diesel vehicles. And they told us that if by the mid of this year, if the timetable could be extended for 1 year, then they would have more sufficient time to be prepared. And this is one of our reference point, and that is why we've delayed the timetable for the phasing out of the old vehicles. And these people in the car bodybuilding industry told us that if they could, do more of the assembling works on the mainland, if there's less assembling which need to be done in Hong Kong, again, that could also shorten the time. And regarding the 15-year service life limit, now with the commencement of the law, all newly registered vehicles will only be allowed to run for 15 years, unless after 15 years they can still satisfy the prevailing standard for new vehicles at that time. So the exception mechanism is there, and it's target based. That is, we will look at the standard applicable to newly registered vehicles at the time. As whether or not after they've installed a catalyst converter, then they can satisfy the standard at that time. Well, that would depend on the technology that would be developed going forward. But the mechanism is already put into the regulation. Mr. Chen Kowloon, I'd like to thank the deputations for coming. I'm sure there more deputations will be sharing their thoughts with us in the next session. I myself actually, I've been went to school in a school bus. My mother also was a driver of a school bus. I've always suffered from asthma. Many of my family members also have similar problems. So in our early discussion, all of us agreed that with the proposed legislation, although some of the deputations told us that they would encounter some difficulties, but they still accept this arrangement. And other deputations also drew our attention to the issue of public health and so on, and we need to spend money in exchange for better public health. And now some told us the timetable has been delayed for a year. Of course, we would like to see everyone having a healthy lung instead of lungs like this. So what I want to say is that since I'm also, partially a member of trade, and can empathize with your situation, but I would also like our friends of the transportation industry to be able to drive vehicles which are cleaner. We all want to see that. If the government, spend more money, at the same time government is extending the deadline for another year, and if money can solve the problem, then nothing can do.
All right, I have asthma, and my children also have asthma, and I've also been affected by the transportation sector because my health is also affected. That's why I'd like to know if the deadline has to be deferred by another year. I've heard Mr. Lai said that's because of the replacement of the body, because of the assembly problem, because technically it's difficult, but then you said that if some of these spare parts can be manufactured outside Hong Kong, then the replacement could be somewhat faster. So have you thought about this? So have you really thought about this with more resources available? Have you talked to the trade, and then have you talked to the assembly line so that they can also have the spare parts made elsewhere, and then they can all come back to Hong Kong for assembly, and then we will be able to expedite the program by advancing it a little further? Yes, Mr. Lai. Well, this is a very complex issue. Of course, we hope that the vehicles can be replaced as soon as possible, and then we can all enjoy clean air, as some of the professors and green groups have suggested. But then we are facing this very real problem, which is a commercial issue, because we are talking about 2/3 of the commercial diesel vehicles. They are trucks, nanny buses, and also tourist coach buses and so on. They have everything to do with our daily life. That's why we really have to look at the situation on the ground. Other than the assembly of new vehicles, we also have to understand that as far as the trade is concerned, this is a new policy, and that would also have a huge impact on their operation. That's why after discussing with the trade for several months, we have finally come to this agreement, which is acceptable to both sides. That is, on the one hand, the administration will be increasing the ex gratia payment. In fact, we are actually increasing that by some $3 billion. And on the other, with regard to the service life, we'll be extending that by 1 year for Euro 1, Euro 2, and Euro 3, so that more time can be given to the trade to prepare for that, and then there'll be more time for them to replace their vehicles, and then in terms of the assembly of vehicles, they'll have more sufficient time. That's why in terms of the amendment timetable, we have actually got many considerations. It's not just about the assembly of the body of the vehicle. How about the professor's view, that is, we should consider public health, because what about respiratory systems being affected, and also the medical costs that could entail? Well, our target or objective is to launch the scheme as soon as possible, so that everybody will stand to benefit. Yes, Mr. Frankie Yik. Yes, thank you, Chairman. As Mr. Gary Chen said, for those deputations that have spoken today, they are basically in support of the administration's proposed scheme, and of course this is a hard-earned result. But then we have also heard voices from those who are running a small business, and they are concerned that by the time when they replace their vehicles, if they are not able to afford a new car, and then they are concerned that there might not be adequate supply in the second-hand market. So I don't know if there are people working in that sector, because Hong Kong people are very smart. Surely they'll be able to get supply for these vehicles, and so long as they can meet the European standards, they should be able to import them. So it's not just Euro 5, they might be able to import even Euro 6 models. So if we can have adequate supply, then the trade can be rest assured. They don't have to worry that they cannot afford a new vehicle by that time, and then for old or second-hand vehicles, there won't be any supply, and they will have to close down their business. So will you consider providing further support to the SMEs, like the government's other initiatives, like a low interest loan or a guarantee scheme, so that they'll be able to get they can get better terms when they try to buy these new vehicles, and that would also help ease their financial burden. Mr. Lai, well, as far as the supply of used vehicles, what you said was right. If we have used vehicles suppliers, if they are able to procure used vehicles elsewhere, and if they are able to meet the Euro 5 emission standards, then yes, they can import them into Hong Kong and they can get registered. But of course, we will have to wait till the trade takes the initiative to do it, because the supply and the prices will be something that they will have to consider themselves. And second is about the possibility of introducing a loan scheme for the sector. When we came up with this express payment scheme, we also approached some of the banks which also offer loans for these vehicles, because they have treated this as one source of business. That's why after the details are out, they'll be more than happy to consider whether or not they'd like to introduce further schemes to help the trade to procure new cars. Because for the loan sector, the competition is very fierce. The interest rate is almost P-2, and for people buying new vehicles, all they need to do is to make a down payment of 10-20%, and we'll talk to the Trade Department, because they do have this SME loan scheme for those working in the logistics sector, and if they need to procure new vehicles, which is part of their capital expenditure, then they can also get some low interest guarantee loans. So for the details, we can talk later. Mr. Frankie Yik, I hope that the department and the bureau will take the initiative of approaching the supplier in order to find out the availability of such vehicles in the market, because I'm sure those from the trade would be very concerned about this. And also for the SME loan scheme, well, we are referring to logistics sector, but then as you have heard, some of them are individual operators. They are not working in the logistics sector. So can you help them too? If they have a need, can you also help them? Can you look into that? All right. Mr. Dennis Kwok, I'll have to draw a line here. Yes, Mr. Kwok. Yes, Madam Chair, I'd also like to follow up on a point made by my party colleague, Mr. Kenneth Locke, on the economic loss that might be incurred as a result of air pollution. I've read the submission and presentation by Dr. Lai, and then you also refer to some figures, and I'm sure the Bureau is also aware of that. And in terms of the resources that have to be put in for the replacement of these vehicles, has the administration considered the economic benefit or implications that might be affected by air pollution, so that we can have a more focused understanding of the severity of the problem? Mr. Lai? Thank you, Mr. Kwok. We launched this replacement program with the biggest objective of improving air quality and thus public health. So that's our biggest objective, and therefore the health cost is of course one of our considerations. But other than considering the health spending and also health cost, we also have to bear this in mind, because we also have the user pay or polluter pay principle when it comes to many environmental initiatives. That's why when we consider the details for this scheme, we also have to look at it from this perspective. That's why on this occasion, the ex gratia payment is about 30% of the price of a new vehicle. That's because we believe that this is part of a commercial operation. So for the polluters and also the lorry drivers, they also have the duty to pick up part of the cost, and also these vehicles have been running for a while, and therefore the economic value the residual economic value is limited. But then the reason why we are prepared to pay some 27% of the cost for that, this is as what Mr. Dennis Kwok just said. We cannot just look at the economic value. We should not be looking at the value of this truck that has been running for 27 years. We also have to consider how we can improve the environment, and also how everybody will have to contribute to improving the environment. All right, thanks again for the deputations coming during this session. We hope that we'll be able to share the cost out by a fair tax system. We should not be aggravating the conflicts between different sectors of the community. So we'll take a break and then we'll come back.